Right, I'm going to tell you about You Make It. Oh, I'm Shay, by the way. Right, we'll leave that for a second, I'll jump into mine. I'm Shay, founder of You Make It. I built a tech platform some time back, and I've been on a journey through that tech platform. I've learned a lot, I've met new people. I'm going to introduce you to a few people today that I wish I knew at the start of my journey. I'm going to tell you about some of the pitfalls I experienced being a startup founder, the things I wish I could do differently that I know now, and I wish I knew back then. It's all part of the journey, I guess. Now, in terms of You Make It, before I go into the picture that I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you what was that burning question that got me fired up and made me think, I really want to make this platform come to life. I sat there and I thought, I'm sure you've experienced it at some point. You've used a product and you thought, this is stupidly inferior. I really don't like how this works. It could be anything. A chair, a hairdryer, a table, I have no idea. Or you had a cracking idea for a product you wish existed, but it just didn't exist. I'm going to stop there thinking, I am subject to whatever I buy in stores. I don't have access to getting a product made for me. The thing is, there are designers, and there are makers, and there are people that connect you and bring anything to life. So if the talent's out there and the people exist, why doesn't that happen? You lack the time, you lack the resources, and you lack the knowledge. If we connected that chain up and we had designers, makers, people who wanted things, it could come to life. And if only it was simple as that. I framed it, and I used my go-to guy called Steve. Steve is the person I go to whenever I pitch You Make It. Always get a Steve. Steve's awesome because he helps you tell your story. He's your persona. Now in my case, I use Steve. I'll tell you all about Steve. Steve was recently promoted at a new office, right? And Steve is a fan of Victorian artwork. As part of this promotion, Steve thought to himself, what should I get to celebrate my new promotion? He thought, I love 18th century artwork, I'm a fan of Victorian pieces. I would love a bespoke Victorian lampshade sat upon my table. So he visualized it. Walnuts with a bit of brass, maybe some frosted glass. That's a cool idea. Problem is, Steve doesn't make stuff, and he doesn't design things. So the first thing he did was went to Etsy, Swoon, Heels, all the famous places in London. Problem is, it didn't exist. The idea was in Steve's head. He imagined it. So he goes, so You Make It, a platform. And on You Make It, Steve describes what he's after. I want a bespoke Victorian lampshade. Allocates a fairly hefty budget of £1,000. Just been promoted, feels like he's able to splash out. Allocates the budget. 20% goes towards a design contest that springs to life. Designs from Berlin, from Italy, from Germany. Being Victorian, also from London, starts submitting designs. Designs roll in. He looks at the designs. Designs first 2, 3, 4 designs are brilliant. Design 5 he absolutely falls in love with. Blows him away. Walnut base, brass stem, Corinthian leather trim, frosted glass top. Someone's able to smell that Corinthian leather through the photorealistic sketch. Blows him away. Selects the design. The moment he does that, local makers bid to make it come to life. Steve selects the best maker. 3 weeks later, there's a knock on the door. A box arrives. Steve opens the box. There is his lampshade staring back at it. He imagined it just weeks before. Goes to work, sets it upon his table. Friends fall in love with it. Steve, where did you get that lampshade from? Oh, I made it. All my own. Nobody else has it. I made it by myself. They want one. Steve now thinks, well, I could make more of these. And he does. He goes to the manufacturer. He gets it made. It's a lot cheaper. It's not as expensive anymore because he's doing it on scale. So Steve's gone from wanting bespoke products into becoming an entrepreneur. That's Steve's journey. Steve was my go-to guy to frame what You Make It is about. If you're building a startup, if you're building a platform, get a Steve. Steve's awesome. Helps you capture the proposition, helps you communicate it. Now, the first thing we did was, in building our platform, was we created what's called an MVP. An MVP, in other words, in startup lingo, and I apologize at any point, if anything seems, what's he talking about? Stop me. I'll explain it. An MVP is a minimum viable product. Minimum viable product means you make the most stripped down, rudimentary, basic version of what you do just so that you can test the platform, test the concept. Does it work? Do the people you're making it for actually want it? Is it solving a real problem, or is it a cool idea that your ego is fleshing out and making you build? It's got to solve a real problem. The MVP helped us speak to real designers. We went to new designers, interviewed hundreds of designers and asked them, would you use this? Is this something you'd be keen on? They loved it. If you're giving designers an opportunity to submit sketches for a project, why not? From that, we took all that information and we built our alpha version. The alpha version we called alpha simply because it was our first real live version. We invested into building it. Now, as I said, if I could do this again, I would do it totally different. I would spend time, understand what UX, user experience, really means. I would understand the market, and I wouldn't build something the way I did it then. This worked, but it was very, very technical. People didn't understand it. They didn't really get it. Designers did, but people didn't. We were trying to connect three separate people together that lived in totally different ecosystems. Designers, makers, and users. We were trying to find the most seamless way to do it, and we didn't manage to do that in the alpha. So from that, we went back and we built a series of case study projects with different people with different needs. Now, so that, and this was completely offline. This we didn't need tech for. Completely offline, and that helped us then build a beta version, which was live a few months ago, and we felt this was quite seamless and worked. The traction that we wanted wasn't getting to where we wanted, and I'll come back to what we did next. But the point I'm trying to make with building the various versions of what you're doing, test everything. Every single assumption you have, test it. Don't ever rush into something assuming people want it. Everything's an assumption until you've tested it with people you need to test it, and they say, well, yeah, I like it. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to pay for it. At that point, you know you're on the right track. The next thing I want to go into is get the right team together. Find the right people. There is nothing more important than that. Money doesn't pay for anything that beats human capital. Getting the right people involved in your idea to support what you're doing is absolutely crucial. This team was made up of me and two designers. Neema was with us and she left to do her PhD. Elena was a master's graduate. Leah, in the middle, left Google to become part of our team. And the guys on the left were our development team working from India. So the right team makes a fundamental difference to what you're building. It's absolutely crucial. The next point is we were selected, before I go into that next team bit, one on this, validation is crucial. How do you know you're building something that works? Making a pretty platform that looks like other pretty platforms doesn't mean it works. Making a platform that works the way you want it to still doesn't mean it works. It works when real people are paying real cash to use it. That's one of your validation points. But you still celebrate all the other little wins along the way. For us, that was being selected by Google Launchpad for an accelerator and spending a whole week going through experts from Android, Apple, the tech giants of the world, telling us what we should do and how we should refine it and what needs to happen next. And that was awesome validation for us. And there were tons of this. And towards the end, I'll explain what was our most critical form of validation to date. Was meeting Designers Block and partnering up with peers, lovely peers from Designers Block, who for the last 20 years have worked with designers, orchestrated events like you're in today, and put together the London Design Week. So collectively, together, this for me is our biggest form of validation. It's finding a team like Piers has and understanding their experience with their design network and how that should now flesh out a platform. So we're pivoting again. While we're pivoting, we have a separate project underway, but the pivot is now focusing on designers rather than just people. And that's our big difference that we're working on. So, in terms of what I'd like you to take away in building a startup, if you have an idea, and if you were like me and you're completely restless and you dread the thought of being in a 9 to 5 because this idea is consuming you, go and do it, no matter what it takes. You'll have 100,000 hurdles along the way, but it's part of the journey and it gets you there. Don't give up just because something goes wrong and you don't get there. Second thing is, find the right people. The guys I'm going to introduce you to today, I just mentioned Piers, the other guys I'm going to introduce you today, as I said, I wish I knew all of them at the start of my journey. I now call them friends, and I love the advice and the ideas they have, and I would totally shape a new platform based on working with those, with the types of people I'm going to tell you about. Anyway, that's my talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope there's something useful you can take away from it. I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Antonas Okay, who's going to tell you? Actually, I'm going to tell them what you're going to tell them. I'm going to leave you to it. That's okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry, before I brush up, does anyone have any questions about You Make It? Or, no? All come? Lovely. Oh, do it at the end, yes, sure, no problem. Right, Antonas, you're up.
Hi, I'm Anton. I'm a visual designer. I work for a digital product company called Make Us Proud. And I would like to talk about visual styles and design trends and how they might affect your work and who you are as a designer. So, a huge challenge for me is making my work authentic and expressing myself when I work and making things that are exciting for people. Because as a designer, I like making things that bring joy and excitement. And I think there are many ways to achieve that, to make products or designs that look enjoyable and exciting. And one of those ways is to make things diverse. And as visual designers, we have a lot of freedom. We have colors and shapes and layouts, all those things that make design very different. But at the same time, working for different companies, or branding companies, or agencies, advertising agencies, you might experience pressure from your peers or from your clients to make things, to limit yourself based on what is popular at the moment. And I call those design trends. Before I start explaining myself what a design trend is for me and how it affects my workflow, I'd like to give you an example of what I consider to be a really bad design trend, and this is the thing that I experienced firsthand, being a kid. Now, you've probably all been to Barbican, right? It's a really cool example of brutalism, architectural style. And for me, that is the worst architectural style ever. And yeah, it's usually polarizes audiences. Don't get me wrong, I think it's a really cool concept. The idea of stripping buildings and exposing their function through how they look and the materials, using raw materials, is a really cool idea. But I really hate what it turned into over a period of time. So, Barbican, it's a really cool thing, right? Now, I'll show you where I've lived for 10 years. And don't get me wrong, might be a really cool picture, but living in these buildings is really, really, really horrible. It's just gray and cold and wet, and you live in a tiny little room in a box. This is Lithuania. It's a post-Soviet country, and the thing is that those countries, they took brutalism and they stripped it down to the very minimum. So it was really easy to build, but lacked all the cool stuff about brutalism. So this is the result of brutalism. Barbican is an experiment. This is a mass production. This is what happens when a trend gets overused and reproduced thousands of times. It's really, really depressing. And how does this happen? How come Barbican turned into this horrible camp? Well, there is a certain life cycle to a trend. So the first part is always exciting. It's the experiment. And I really like this part because you can be a really selfish person. You don't have to think about how your ideas will affect people. You do it for yourself. You do it to make your craft or your art better, to propel your discipline in new, exciting directions. It's a really cool thing. It brings a lot of good stuff to the discipline. Second phase is popularization. So if for some reason a style is good, it looks good, or it achieves certain goals, people start to copy it. It's also really, really nice because it means that the overall level of quality increases and the initial concept evolves and mutates, and suddenly you have this whole new style. The third phase is the bad one. It's oversaturation. So if you have a design trend that is popular, people keep using it, and stripping it down, and it starts appearing everywhere, and eventually all you see is only that style. And it's bad for people because it's boring. You see the same stuff all around you. For designers, it's bad because you become really lazy and you don't have to think anymore, you don't have to question anything anymore. You can play safe, you can just copy whatever other people are doing. Now, I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by oversaturation and things becoming really similar. you probably all used or at least seen Logitech, one of the tech companies. And this is the original logo. And a few years back, they redesigned it. Looks pretty cool. As they describe it, it's now more simple, it's geometrical, it's more modern. Now there's another logo. This is the original Leno logo that they've used for 20 years, I think. And they've done a rebrand a few years back as well. Again, it's really simple and geometrical, really nice. I mean, I like it. And the third one, Google. You all use Google. They've rebranded as well. And this is what I have. This is what they have now. Again, it's really simple and geometrical and really modern. So individually, these logos look pretty cool, and I can totally understand where they were going with this. But when you put them together, might be just me, but they look kind of similar. And I'm not saying these are bad logos. I mean, they look pretty cool and sleek and modern, but in here, we have a bit more diversity. And again, I'm not saying they were good. And this is really subjective topic, but what I'm saying is there's a certain trend of simplifying things and making them more geometrical and more basic, and it becomes really bland and boring. Another example, and this is something from visual design as well as user experience design. Who knows what this is? Apart from me saying, yes, what is this? Yeah, this is the burger menu. It's good, because a lot of people actually do not recognize this symbol out of the context, and it's actually very illustrative of how bad it might be. So a burger menu is a really cool way of simplifying your navigation on the website, but the problem is there isn't always a need for that. You might have a very simple navigation, and putting a burger menu at the top of your website is only a matter of fashion, because everyone does it, all the agencies do it, why should I do it? And it's another example of a trend that is being duplicated only because you are afraid of breaking away from the pack, or you're just too lazy to think how to make it a bit different. Now, being a visual designer and who has worked I've worked in advertisement, in branding, in service design, product design, and most common thing about designers that I know is fear. Fear of being laughed for being old school or not following trends, making things that are not fashionable or popular. And these are all valid things, but if you follow the trend all the time, you end up making things that are not authentic. They do not represent who you are as a designer. They don't bring any joy or excitement to people because you're just adding to the overall blandness and boringness of what else is out there. And you end up in a dead end. You haven't created anything of value. You've added to the overall homogeneity of design, and no one is happy. It's really sad. You know, temperature goes down, atoms slow down, universe dies. Now, so what I'm trying to say here? What I'm trying to say here is that as a designer, and it doesn't matter if you're a visual designer, product designer, UX designer, clothing designer. I think we all want to make things that are exciting and interesting, and as I said before, excitement and joy. Well, it stems from lots of things, but for me, it also comes from diversity. And whenever you're designing, first of all, you have to be responsible, you have to be aware of what is popular, and you have to be aware of what will happen if I follow the pack, what will happen if I use a style that is very popular at the moment. I mean, will this actually bring joy to people, or will I just will I make another faceless product? Another thing is courage, because it's really difficult to break away from the rest of the team and just say that, no, let's try an experiment, let's make something different. So having technical skills is one thing for a designer, but is the integrity of using them. Are you thinking how your product, your design will affect people? And you have to be really brave to make something different. And the third thing that I've learned, and I want to sort of invite you to think about this, is to don't take yourself too seriously, because we are not heart surgeons, we're not brain surgeons. If we make a mistake, if we don't follow the trend and we make something different, we might end up looking funny, people might laugh, people might not like our work, but I think it's much more valuable for you as a designer, for a creator, and for people around you to take a risk and break away from the trend and make something unique and outstanding. Maybe not fashionable, maybe stupid, but it'll be different, and just the fact that it's a bit different will make it more exciting. Just to give you an example, remember late 90s, early 2000s? I love that time because look at all the freaking shapes. I mean, they had flip phones. They had phones that you have to hold with both hands at the same time. Phones were different. I'm not saying they were super convenient, but it was exciting to use them because there was so much of different stuff out there. Now, if you pull out your iPhone or your Samsung, they all look the same. There's no keyboard, they all thin, they look like the same brick. And there are some reasons for that, obviously, like usability, yada, 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 yada. But it's not exciting using those products. I don't enjoy holding them in my hands because they're all the same. Now, another example is good old MTV logo. And for me, this is what I want to do. I want to make stuff that's quirky, and it's exciting, and it doesn't follow the trend, because like, if you're aware of design trends now, it's really fashionable to make really geometrical, really flat things. And for me, the opposite of that, making dimensional stuff that has lots of colors, that has textures, it's funny, it has lots of elements. So what I'm trying to say is don't feel afraid of feeling stupid or making a mistake. Don't copy paste what you see around you. Just intentionally make things that are opposite to the trend, and you might end up making something new and exciting and just bringing joy and excitement to people. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much. Right. So, hi, my name is Luis, and I'm a digital project designer and UX designer, also working at Maker's Craft together with Antonas. So I want to talk to you a little bit about UX, because Shay mentioned earlier that if he had known more about UX when he started, it would have helped his process. So I'd like to try to give you a quick overview of what UX is and how you can use that to make yourself look really good. But before we get started on what UX is, I want to show you this image of 5 seemingly quite innocent products, quite not normal. You probably recognize the phone from Antonas' images earlier. But the issue with these ones, when you actually look closer, is that they all have something wrong with them. For example, as much as we love our friends and family, we might not necessarily want to share a booth with them when we go to the bathroom. This one here has a very misfortunate placement of the valve to inflate this toy. And this one here, I'm not really sure what's going on, and I don't think anyone who gets into this lift really know immediately which button to press. And the one in the middle, which looked like a perfectly fine phone, which is difficult for you to see, I appreciate that, but basically what they've done is that they put the keyboard in the middle, as usual, back in that time, but they put the letters in alphabetical order, thinking that that would be a new logical way of making it. Unfortunately, that went to immediately failure for Lava V5, and no one ever heard of that phone ever since. So, what do these all have in common? Well, basically, maybe nobody actually looked at them and thought the process behind before we make them. So, going back to what Shane was talking about earlier, knowing about UX. So, UX basically is user experience, and it is a design process whose purpose is to create products, digital or non-digital, that are actually useful to users and bring them pleasure, that they can use, and they actually will use, and they actually need. So there is a difference between making a product because you want it, and then you have an amazing visual designer like Antonas that makes it all look pretty. But are people actually going to use it? Well, if they end up being like this, probably not. Okay, so I'd like to take you through a process of how you can make this not happen. So the process that we use in UX is one of them is called the double diamond. It's basically discover, define, develop, design, deploy, and deliver. And I'm quickly going to go through mainly the discover and define one, because I know we want a short time here. So discovery phase is all about the research and actually asking yourself a question: why am I making this product, and who do I want this product to be used by? What's the purpose, and what's the success for my product or my project or whatever it is you make it? And with that comes the research. As all of you probably know, research is an extremely important part of any process, and you've got to find out before you get started so you don't end up wasting time and money. So part of the research, it's really good to find out facts. Facts such as who is using the product, who is currently using it on the market, what is exists at, discussing understand issues, interviewing the right people, surround yourself with the right team, as Shay mentioned earlier. Actually, what would success look like for this particular thing? What do I think would be success? And then also look at the market and competitors. What are people currently doing? How are they getting around using a product at the moment, even if they're not happy with it? Why are they not happy with it? How can we make them happy? And if the product doesn't exist, what do they use instead? We find this out through actually interviewing people. If you're working with a client, then it's important to obviously interview the client and the stakeholders and get an understanding of what their vision is. For example, in this case, I might ask, sit down and talk to Shay and get a full understanding of what he actually wants to create and why. Interviewing users, you might not necessarily have any customers at the moment, but actually finding who your potential customers are going to be, or who the people who are using a competitor's product at the moment they will give you a lot of insight. And you can also conduct simple user surveys online. I do put that in bracket because it's quite difficult to reach out. I don't know how many of you click on a survey and go, yay, love the survey, want to take that survey. It's really difficult medium to use. Looking at competitors and actually analyze what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong, and why people are liking their products, and also why they don't like the product, what position they have in the market at the moment, and why you want to position yourself. Are you looking to make a luxury product that's going to be used by incredibly rich people who live a fabulous lifestyle? Or is it going to be for everybody, or is it going to be specific target market? And the task analysis is basically observing people using their products now. For example, so you made this amazing phone, you thought, do you know what, I'm going to put the keyboard in alphabetical order, you give it to someone, you observe them watch it, and they don't know, understand it, they don't know what to do with it. That's basically just observing how people are interacting with it and realizing, I think we made a mistake here. We probably should have tested this before we went into production. And there you are with 2 million phones that nobody wants to buy. So once we've got all of that research together, we can start pulling all this together, analyze it, and start defining what our product is going to be and what it's going to look like. And a really simple way of asking or finding out about what you're doing is the right thing is to basically ask yourself this: what, who, why, where, when, how. So what is it, and who is it for? Why should they use this? Where would we expect them to use it, and when, and also how? It could be a home, it's on the move, it's on a mobile, it's on a desktop, it's something they're using all the time, only when they need to, and it's for, we mentioned earlier, different types of levels in society, or it's just generally for everybody. So it's basically establishing where we are and where we want to be, the current versus the future, and how we're going to get there. To help us do this even more, we can create personas. And Shay introduced us earlier to the lovely Steve, and this is basically a really good way of creating a whole story and journey around the person who could be potentially a user. You might recognize personas from marketing, but these personas are different because they're based on behavior rather than the ideal purchaser of your product. And what we try to establish is a user journey, which also Shay took us through Steve. He wanted something, and how did he end up getting it? And that journey that he went through to get that is what we want to try to establish and pinpoint, so we can find the pitfalls. What are the problems that people are having? When do they get negative responses if it's something for a website? When do they leave the website, and why do they leave at this point? All of that stuff will actually make us define how to make things better. Mentioned about the user stories and scenarios around Steve to create something that actually your client or a company that you want to sell this to can get sort of a human attachment to it and go, yes, I want to help Steve. We all want Steve to succeed. And it's also helped with spotting potential features because we know where Steve is having trouble at the moment. To wrap this up on how this is helping us, we can create design hypotheses, proposals, or principles. And in Shay's, I know this sounds a bit complicated, but in Shay's scenario, it might be something like this. So we believe by building a platform that supports the production of pretty much any product, help designers, makers, and everyday people to communicate, we can remove waste from production and eliminate poor products by iterating design. So it clearly states what we want to do, who we want to do it for, why we want to do it, and what we want the outcome to be. And all the way through the process, the rest of the process, we go back to this and look at what we're trying to do. Is this responding to this? And if it is, it means we're on the right track. If it isn't, we might have gone off scope. As we got all that together, now it's time to start developing and designing this. And this is where this part is going to be slightly shorter because as a UX designer, I might now introduce a visual designer to help us create a vision of what this might potentially look like. So we want to basically design, test, iterate, and then repeat. Because we're not just going to make one thing and then see if it works, and that's it. Because this is what Shay was mentioning earlier about an MVP, but we're not even going to get to an MVP yet, because we're only at the stage of choosing features based on how we're helping Steve in this scenario. We're going to brainstorm up ideas, how that might potentially look, what it might be, and how it's going to function. And we do this for what we call rapid prototyping. And it can be simple drawings, sketches, things cut out of cardboard, things that we just put together. It's just to visualize what the finished product could look like and function. And then we test that. This will save time and money before we invest a lot. Again, remember the phone. I haven't tested a phone, I know it's going to be awesome, I've got 200 million phones waiting to go out to the world. If I had done this, I would have probably realized that putting the keyboard in alphabetical order was not a good idea. No one's going to like that. Again, bringing this back, because it's about going back to that person, to Steve, his story, and how we're helping him. That's why I'm bringing this back all the time. This helps us guide us through the process, on and on, over and over again. So, and to make us proud, we work in a cycle: design, test, and iterate. And we do this in cycles over and over again. And it's not a question of how many cycles when it's finished. It's something could be based on time or money, the time that you have with a client, the time for the project, and the budget for it. But what a good indicator is when people start telling you things, do you know what, I love this. When is this available? Can I buy it soon? Where can I get it from? These indicators telling you that you're on the right track, and maybe we can move on to the next phase of actually deploying and delivering it. And this is the point where you get someone like a developer in, for example, that they build the first MVP, the first minimum viable project that you have developed, to go out and test if it actually works. And as a UX designer, you're still sticking to the project. You might not be involved as much, but you are still sticking to it to make sure that we are following, that we don't go off track, and that we actually, people are using it the way we expect it to, or we have to make changes. So, quick summary, user experience is basically products that offer great experiences. That's what we want to create. Discover, define, develop, design. Why should you use it? Because you can be comfortable and know that products have the right to exist because you actually tested them and people want to use them. And it will save you time, effort and money, both your money and your investors, which in many cases are really important. And finally, I want to just say that does it better will always beat did it first. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Don't use Macs. I'm a PC man. Oh, okay, so I actually do something a little different to these guys. I'm a researcher and writer and digital innovation. We run a digital innovation company as well. Nicely, kind of what I'm going to talk about actually touches on what all of these guys have said at various points. And that's that design is a process that happens over time. You guys know that you're part of that world. It's a process that has a beginning, a middle, and as long as you don't go broke or mad, then there's an end as well. It's a process. It involves meeting people and kind of unpacking dreams and ambitions and ideas. It's about understanding needs and solving problems. It's about being ambitious and being brilliant and being wrong and learning and trying again and then hopefully succeeding. Along the way in all of these kind of design processes, then there are different locations that you're going to come into contact with. There are different journeys that you're going to go on, or products or pieces of the product are going to go on. There are going to be different characters that you meet and scenes that happen and emotions to kind of navigate and challenges to overcome, and hopefully there'll be a climax and then a resolution, which will be your end result, your product. Now, I know I'm going to ask a rhetorical question here, does that sound familiar? Yes, that is basically the plotline to Die Hard, or any other blockbuster, like Hollywood blockbuster you want to choose actually. And why is that? It's because the narrative of the design process is a narrative. It is a story, it's a journey. And it's a narrative that can be just as important to record and unpack and tell as the end result, as the product itself and the way that it moves throughout the world. And that's mainly what I want to talk about for the next couple of minutes. And like I say, I am a writer and researcher, so I have a professional and personal bias with this particular way of viewing things. So my work generally is with a range of different people, from small local councils and visitor attractions to national museums, world expos, kind of blue chip clients, that kind of stuff. There's a whole range of different things that we do. And that's kind of museums and heritage sites, visitor attractions, looking at kind of digital extensions to books, seeing how the physical and the digital interact, and how you can create experiences that share knowledge and empower people. Most recently, actually, we've been working with the Design Museum, because they're, as you probably know, moving to Kensington, and we're helping them with the kind of the narrative layout and their kind of theming and techniques and tools for displaying their new collections in the new space. So what happens if you look at design through a narrative lens? And actually, yeah, I mean, you're all sat on chairs, like think about the chair that you're on and kind of, it's come from somewhere. It begins with, there was a need, people needed to sit down, so someone identified that need and designed something that kind of through various iterations has become the chair that you're sitting on. Kind of an interesting, so it's kind of identifying the need and knowing what it needs, what it takes to kind of fulfill that need. So actually interesting point, in France, you can't register yourself as an artisan unless you promise that everything you make, or you can prove that everything you make has a practical use. And you can't register yourself as an artist unless you can promise that no two things you make will be the same. Yeah, a fun little fact there. Gotta love the French for precision, they like that. So this, process of identifying and understanding the need is kind of vital to the design narrative. It takes workshops, and as Louise was saying, it's meeting people, different people, getting different opinions, working out those ideas and trying to define them. And for me, generally, that involves lots of reading of research papers and anthropological studies and museum reports and all sorts of stuff. But for you guys, it would be all sorts of different things. Developing this understanding are the who and the why chapters of the design narrative. And it's kind of, I mean, it's my belief, and I think the research is showing this as well, that what you say about what you do and who you are and how you share that knowledge is going to have an ever-increasing impact on people's buying decisions. Kind of having a good answer for the what of what a product is. It's this, it does this, like that's not enough anymore. People want to know they're buying with their conscience, they're buying with their emotions. So we're on to the next stage of the design narrative, making thoughts and ambitions a reality. This is where you start to bring in more people, more skills, knowledge and ideas, and I mean, the broader the better, the more people, the better the ideas you can get together and try and wrangle, the better it will be. And these elements all become interrelated and interact with a purpose in mind, and kind of mix together and form this kind of alchemical kind of thing that ends, this process that ends with a thing. That is your product or your result. And for me personally, and this is the brilliance, this is the magic, this is where the story is created, this is what people want to know when they buy a product. They want to know these stories, who built it, why, what were they doing, who was involved, where did they go, what inspired this curve, this shape. And so again, a plea from me as a kind of a storyteller and a writer: stop throwing away your files, your prototypes, your models, your data, all of that. Keep it, keep it, keep it. That is the 3D and physical record of your thinking and action. Right? That's the story right there. That's what's happening. So next time you move office or whatever, don't chuck it away. Ask mum and dad, stick it in their garage, stick it in their attic, and if all that fails, then send it to me and I'll keep it, and that'll be fine, you know? So anyway, we've got a beginning, a middle, and hopefully an end to the design narrative, but that's not the end of the story. In fact, the marketing, the selling, and the kind of the ownership of the objects beyond is where the story really gets kind of even more interesting, because it's a chapter that you don't have control of. Everyone else is interacting with your design out in the real world, and it takes on a life of its own. So, interesting kind of story here. I don't know if you guys know Lucian Day, the designer of the polyprop chair. Yeah, kind of similar to this that you're sat on at the moment. Basically, he designed this chair kind of, whatever it was now. But he had no idea where this thing was going to go. Now I'm pretty sure it's in every country around the world, being used by God knows how many people for how many different things. And to remind himself of this, he had in his office on the wall a picture of the polyprop chair with the legs removed, screwed to the top of a dugout canoe on the Amazon, floating down the Amazon River, just to remind himself he had no idea where his product was going to end up. Like that was a whole different story. But I mean that's another kind of talk right there. So what can we conclude with this then? That the things that you design and produce are the heroes of their own story. They're all heroes in their own story, and we're their supporting cast. Like, we facilitate that movement and that growth and that kind of being, essentially. And that kind of narrative will, and these kind of products and designs can then go on to become supporting cast in other people's stories, other product stories, inspiring different ideas. And so, what am I saying is that you guys are creating these narratives in your everyday work. You're doing it all the time. They have real value, not just as a record of your creative process, but as an explanation of why and how you do what you do, and who you do it for. It's kind of the story that makes each design, each thing unique, and that's the capture. That's the kind of what you want to share with anyone who comes into contact with that. Interestingly, this idea of narrative, there's an anthropological study which you can look up called Significant Objects, where people bought objects for about $5 or $10 from bric-a-brac stores and flea markets and that kind of thing. And they got university creative writing students to write a fictional story about each object, which was kind of told as fiction. It's kind of, I was walking with my girlfriend in the market, we picked this up, and it's been with us through 3 house moves, now we're downsizing, and all the kind of nice stories, a bit of history to the object. And the idea was what they were testing was, if you write a story about something, give it a history, and invest it with significance, does that then make it worth more to people? So what they did is they sold these objects on eBay with the stories, and they worked out that they actually, on the version 1 that they did, they made a 2,706% profit purely by having those narratives attached to those products. That was approved. Version 2 was even more, and I think they're running version 3 now. So, there's one last thing to say. Thanks to you guys, kind of, the design narrative is changing dramatically. It's changing quickly, and the user design maker sequence that has been pretty much extant since the Industrial Revolution is kind of being disrupted in a way which no one can kind of see what's going to happen next. Users are becoming designers thanks to people like You Make It and other guys who are putting them in touch with the people who have the knowledge to design these things. There are all sorts of platforms that kind of and I mean, I could get a 3D design and have print it in my own house. You know, it's kind of, I could then become a maker myself. And kind of manufacturers are interacting directly with users. So you can contact the factory and design your own trainers and get them shipped and sent to you. You go to certain banks, you can put a picture on your card and design it any way you like. It's a kind of, all the interfaces are shifting and being changed, and the pace of this mashup is only going to increase as computing power gets greater, costs for all of the usual stuff. So, from my perspective, and the companies that I work for, definitely, this is the most exciting time. The story, the narrative of design has never been more interesting, and I hope it carries on. So thank you all for making my work more interesting.
So well left. Next, move to the next image. What do I do? Or don't do it yet. Oh, I just click on that and it gets me to the next image. I just click on that. I'll start in a second. I'm just going to talk about one image. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to talk about an image which you'll see. Before I do that, so we heard from 4 friends. So, Shay, and he talked a lot about team. And Antonas, I really hold on to this thing of straying from stuff which is very popular, you know, and really being outside of the norm. Pete just now talking about the narrative cycle and across the different scale of projects that he works on. So this is true for that. And with Louise, I really was struck by how it's important to kind of interview and know the person that you're working with and the people you're doing that. Before I came here, I asked some friends of mine, you know, there's this London Design Festival going on, and what do you think we should talk about? So this is a very eminent person. This is very world-renowned. He ran a university. He's incredibly famous. Some of them have heard this, but I can't tell you who it is. He goes, "I'm the last person to ask for ideas for your talk, since the blurbs about the other speakers' offers come over to me as a load of Shoreditch gobbledygook. However, I wonder if there's scope for you to elucidate your thinking behind what you say about neuroscience and innovation in your last article. I won't be doing that. Unless, of course, you have the nerve to do a presentation of how the language of young tech designers is in danger of being incomprehensible to anyone outside the coffee bars of Shoreditch." So, with that, let's take you to the image I will talk about. Does anybody, you can probably recognize this one. Does anybody know anything about the image on the left? Don't shout out, but
I mean,
put your hand up.
looks like Vilnius, man.
Looks like Vilnius. It's like all the people from Lithuania are here to diss their country. It looks like Vilnius.
It looks like home.
When I saw Antonas with that slide, I just said, okay, it's a segue into my thing. Okay. Well, it's in London. Don't shout out, but who, I would imagine at least half, you know. Put your hand up if you think you know what this image is. Okay. Those who don't know what the image is, where would you guess this image is from? It's actually been constructed. So those of you who don't know what it is, try have a guess. Spit out a few names. Oh, you didn't actually know where it is? No. Oh, this is great. Okay. But we'll come to that. So, this was taken in the early 90s. And it's taken very close to here. It's got the same postcode. So it's in this borough. It's an area of 20 separate housing estates between Elephant Castle, Packham, Camberwell, Old Kent Road, New Kent Road, Warmouth Road. And it's just one of 20 housing estates. This one is called Wyndham Estate. And it's one which you folks who will recognize, some of you, have somebody heard of the film Attack the Block? Put your hand up, have you heard of the film Attack the Block? It's a really cool film, it's great, London British film, made in 2011. They filmed it